that gap is kind of one I want to talk about a little bit today. So the trends we looked at before I got into this presentation were, the first thing is that digital and social media is a part of our lives. Whether you're on Facebook or not, whether you are posting up pictures of you in your Brazilian bikini and your CEO finds it, whether your privacy settings are at max or at minimum, whether you're on Facebook or not, people can take a picture, you can leave it background. It's part of your life, you have to understand how it's going to affect you. Without it, we wouldn't exist. Tribal Worldwide started in New York over 13 years ago, and we are the latest opening in the last 2 years. And the gray area that I'm talking about, the gap, is when it comes to social media and how that affects hiring and firing practices. There's an analogy I like to use. Please feel free to take it and quote me. I'd be great. I've never coined the phrase before. But it's that social media is this generation's cigarettes. And that people started using it, everybody jumped onto it, and nobody knew the lasting impact it can have on your professional life. And then finally, how many of you out here have a social media strategy or policy within your company? Show of hands. Very few, and it's mainly because they're handed down from an international group, right? So we've noticed that there's a gap there, and I know little about human resources, but I understand that you need to cover the employee as well as the institution. So moving on, I'm just going to give you guys, there's two parts to my presentation. This first part is to give you some insight into how we think structuring a social media policy should work and what it should cover. And the second part will deal with the gray area. So there's two types that we look at. The first one deals with internal social media policy. And for us, that means any employee has a social media presence, being a representative of the brand, not necessarily speaking for the brand, but I work at Tribal, and things that I do will reflect on my brand. And that's what internal deals with. And external is, if I work at Tribal and I actually post something from Tribal's Facebook page, what my parameters are, where I can post, where I can't post that. So things to consider for internal social media policy. Employees are responsible for what they post. Right? Not everybody thinks about this. This Taco Bell employee quickly got fired after posting this on his social media page.
Was that
Taco Bell. So you can see a strong social media policy will protect your company, because if you don't have anything that dictates things like this, he can have legal recourse to say, well, no, you fired me, there's nothing in my HR manual that dictates that I can't do this. It should be obvious, but these are things you need to cover yourself. Always exercise good judgment. Does anybody know, I don't know if you can see it, but who Amy's Baking Company is?
Oh, I read that. That was very interesting.
So they had this huge meltdown, and it's a personal company owned by two people. With Chef Ramsay went in there, tried to fix the kitchen, didn't work. Basically, they're not exercising good judgment here. They're lashing out at all these people who gave them bad reviews, and it's casting the company in a poor light. So when you're crafting your social media policy, you need your employees to exercise good judgment and say, all right, listen, you're in a certain position. We don't really appreciate if you have yourself in a bikini, a very provocative bikini, for our corporate culture. Right? Protecting confidential info. Now, this is a firm called HMV, and they brought in the entire social media staff and fired them. And the guy sat down in the back on his phone and updated and live tweeted the entire firing. Right? So of course it brought HMV into some hot water, because this guy is letting everybody know, their problems. Right. Right. So protecting yourself by protecting the company's confidential and proprietary information is important. And then finally, productivity matters. Now, what I didn't get into is internal social media policy. You might have a decision where none of our employees are allowed to use social media during work hours, and that can be fine, but that needs to be dictated. There are some policies that they'll allow use for lunchtime or recreational time. There's a certain time limit set on it. But at the end of the day, productivity matters. You need to get what you're there to do done. So that needs to be iterated as well. And we move on to external. So the first thing you want to do is introduce the purpose to your employees. This is in general. They have some companies where all their employees are required to interact on social media. And therefore, they need to know what's the purpose. Where are we going to be? Are we in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Are we just on LinkedIn? Where's our corporation fit in? Why are we there? Consider your audience. This should be pretty straightforward. If you're talking to a group of people that you think are your customers, and you find out that they're not, you're gonna figure out how to bridge that gap, or what they might be interested in. The third thing is understanding the concept of community. Your company doesn't exist in a bubble. If you work in banking, or let's take a big company, for example, Google. Google doesn't exist in a bubble. Google exists among all these other IT giants. And therefore, if you went on, say, Google's Facebook page, they would post things that aren't only specific to Google. So that's what you need to consider. And this is to guide how your social media interaction will go on. Right? So when you have a concept of community, you know that, all right, well, you don't want to be the guy at the party who only talks about himself. Right? You want to talk about things that are going on around your brand. Bring value. I'm not sure if any of you all know who this is. Gary Linehan is a media futurist and one of the dear friends of Travel Worldwide. One of his quotes is that in this day and age, we have less time. How many of you all here have smartphones? And actively use different apps on it. Now, what you find is that his quote is, if you have to become indispensable. Because the minute you're indispensable, you will be dispensed with. People have less and less time. So you need to bring value to your customer or your client base. You need to post stuff that's actually going to be relevant to them. It can't just be cat videos. I tried that, it doesn't really work so well. Exercising good judgment. This needs to be reiterated. Because in Tribal, we have a very basic mantra, is that no politics, no religion. You can extend that further in any of your companies based on your corporate culture and what you want to stay away from. There's some companies that actually ignore that entirely and post really divisive issues just to generate content. Slam 100.5 uses political jokes and stuff like that because it works for them, but it may not work for a bank or the defense force or any other company you have there. So transparency and authenticity. If you have a big brand that, let's say, T-Mobile, at any given point, a number of people run T-Mobile's social media. It's not the same guy in the morning that is in the afternoon. And oftentimes, if I have a complaint, which I'm sure everybody here has had a complaint at some point, you send the complaint to the page. You need to know, okay, I, Robert, sent the complaint and Kevin addressed me. Kevin passed it on to his supervisor, Jason. So it's a digital paper trail. It helps the customer feel a little more secure, and it also helps in protecting your company if Kevin does something wrong. If Kevin does not exercise good judgment and tells me, I'm gonna ask what I want is wrong. And not finally, but respecting copyrights and fair use is a key issue. A lot of brands get in a lot of hot water for not quoting who they got the information from. It seems like a silly thing to bring up, but so this is a post from Huffington Post. And a couple of years ago, Huffington Post was very, very well hated among the journalism community because Huffington Post uses an aggregation sort of format of news thing. They don't really write their own news. They take something from New York Times and say, here's a subject from New York Times, but they weren't really telling you exactly what it was. So copyright and fair use are important because in the internet age, there's nothing new under the sun. It's really hard to generate new original content. So borrowing is accepted, but just say, hey, here's this cool thing we found from X. Really simple and really straightforward. So this is the most interesting thing. I sat down and I thought about social media and hiring. Why the cigarettes of this generation, how is it affecting? How can I quantify it? And we went and found that there were two schools of thought, basically almost divided right down the middle by employee and employer. The employees generally thought it's not really fair to do social media profiling because if I know how to use my social media well and I can hide all of this incriminating evidence, then why does that make me less hireable than someone else who, why does that make me more hireable than someone else who can't or doesn't understand the privacy settings? Let me just qualify that this is really in a situation where if you get 20 applications and you've narrowed it down to 5 equally qualified candidates. This is not just, okay, well, there's a huge difference in experience or technical ability. This is specifically for equally qualified candidates when you come down to the last few, the last five, the last two. And in our discovery of this, we found that it's not an HR issue so much as a privacy issue. And I'll explain a little further about that by showing you a short video by Alessandro Christie, who recently gave a TED Talk. He's a privacy economist, and his job is to do research into how social media, how your information is kept, and how private it really is. Now, I'm not sure how loud those speakers are. He does have a quite thick accent, but he speaks kind of quickly. So we're going to test it, and if it's not loud enough, I'll work it out.
In another experiment, we presented to our subjects information about a potential job candidate. We included in this information some references to some funny, absolutely illegal, but perhaps slightly embarrassing information that the subject had posted online. Now, interestingly, among our subjects, some had posted comparable information, and some had not. Which group you think was more likely to judge harshly our subject? Paradoxically, it was the group who had posted similar information, an example of moral dissonance. Now, you may be thinking, this does not apply to me because I have nothing to hide. But in fact, privacy is not about having to do something negative to hide. Imagine that you are the HR director of a certain organization and you receive the resumes and you decide to find more information about the candidates. Therefore, you Google their names, and in a certain universe, you find this information. Or in a parallel universe, you find this information. Do you think that you would be equally likely to call either candidate for an interview? If you think so, then you are not like the US employers who are in fact part of our experiment. Meaning, we did exactly that. We created Facebook profiles, manipulating trades, and then we started sending out resumes to companies in the US. And we detected, we monitored where they were searching for our candidates and whether they were reacting to the information they were finding on social media. By the way, discrimination was happening through social media for equally skilled candidates.
Now, this goes back to the two schools of thought. We realized that it's happening. So when we try to move forward, we have to figure out a way, middle ground. Now, hands up, you ever done or said anything you regret? Pretty obvious question.
Yes.
Beyonce has. This is some action shots from her Super Bowl performance earlier in the year. And what happened was, just afterwards, these pictures went on the internet, and her publicist went crazy. Take them down, they're terrible for my client's image. And of course, I still got that really easy to find, because the more scandalous it is, the easier it is to stay on the internet. And then I brought this up really to just show you that almost everything you put online has an immortality to it. The worse it is, even better. Right? So there's a study by findlaw.com that says 25% of teens regret social media posts. And a further 3/4 of 18 to 34-year-olds, job seekers, have actually censored themselves. And I mean censored by either taken down a post or refused to post something based on how it might look. So what we figured out is we try to put forward a digital middle ground. Now, this is different for every organization. You guys take it, do what you will with it. But we think this is the best way. We understand profiling is going to happen, but it's not the end all and be all of decisions when you come down to appropriate job candidates. So we have the 4 C's. The first thing is context. We think that content found online, if I posted something today and I posted something 3 years ago, there's a good chance the person that I am today and 3 years ago is going to be 2 different people. Further to that, the person I am 3 years from now is going to be a different person. I'll hold different views, and therefore it needs to be considered when looking at a social media profile. Secondly, culture. Corporate culture is different from every organization. It's why Google might have an interview process with 4 members of the 5-man team interviewing you to see if you'll actually fit. And what we found with social media profiling really helps you gauge a person's personality, but it also doesn't. And I'll explain why in a little bit. Communication. If there are red flags that appear, you think, all right, you're only seeing somebody posting up, you only have pictures of him with a drink in his hand and a fet. You find out on my profile, because I don't really take pictures. I go in a party, I get a picture taken of somebody tags it of me, and I'm there. So I look like an alcoholic. But that's not entirely true. We discuss it out over a drink. And finally, curiosity. Now, the reason I brought up curiosity is because personality profiling doesn't really work through social media because it is my avatar to the rest of the world. There's some people who don't censor themselves. There's some people who do censor themselves. Either one is a heavily moderated source from the source. So it is exactly what I want you to see or what I don't want you to see. So I can actually have very good understanding of my social media profile and post specific things that will make me look like the best possible employee in the world. I could only post pictures, working later again, stuff like that. When in reality, it's all catered to what I think you're going to see. So if you're going to do personality profiling, I think the best way to go forward is really scientific and quantifiable testing, Myers-Briggs, that sort of stuff. So we understand that, yes, social media profiling happens. I think it's a great way to get a sense, but it's not really to be used as any sort of quantifier. So just remember context, culture, communication, and curiosity. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Just for your opinion. You know, in these days, it's kind of growing a bit now in terms of employers and institutions requesting access to passwords to social media, right? What is your take on that?
I don't think that's appropriate. But at the same time, there are, well, it is a privacy issue, but it's also, in the US, I find that, okay, if you look at politics, every time somebody goes out into the political realm, everything about them is dug up. So it may be a situation where, if we're hiring you in a very high visibility position, we might need to know something that could potentially come up and really damage our brand. I don't think it's a good idea carte blanche in general, but if you have somebody in very, very high visibility, you want to know if there's really damning evidence that anybody could find. So,
Anybody with skill.
right, and as I said, there's information out there, there's nothing you can really hide. There's no one can show us that. Yes?
Yeah. In your opinion, how different is profiling on social media from a HR manager or an HR team picking up the phone and calling around to get reference checks?
Well, I think reference checks are a little bit better in that you're getting a response from somebody who's worked with the person. While the person I am at work is different from the person I am at home. It's really, I'm hiring you, I want to know how well you work. So I think the reference check is a better indication, but it's still not the perfect thing, because I might hate my job and act like, one way there and actually love your company and really act very different. So it is better, but it's not, I don't think it could be replaced. I don't think social media profile will be replaced.
Can I just add in that, we're in 2013, we're into 2014, and social media, whether we like it or not, as Robert said, is here to stay. I personally have taken a decision not to use people's social media profiles as any part of my recruitment process, and I won't do it for a client either. And I have my reasons for that. Basically, what Robert said is that it's out of context and so on, and it can be manipulated and so on. But I don't know if some of you in this room would remember a few years ago, and I hope it's not still happening, but maybe the bankers can tell me. A few years ago, it was very common in the banking sector that part of the recruitment process involved bank security, driving around to your neighbors and interviewing your neighbors without your knowledge, without your permission. And the reason why, and I was very publicly vocal about it many years ago, because if I